Most people expect pain to be loud. They imagine arguments, raised voices, tears that spill before anyone can stop them. But some of the deepest hurt in the world makes almost no noise at all. Sometimes when a person is wounded, they don't fight back. They don't explain themselves. They don't even show that anything happened. Instead, they grow quieter. A conversation continues. People laugh. The moment moves on. But inside that person, something small and important has just shifted. The mind steps back. The heart folds inward. And suddenly, the person who was just present, talking, listening, engaging, begins to disappear emotionally in a way that is almost invisible. Not because they don't feel the pain, but because feeling it out loud no longer feels safe. Psychology has a name for this response: emotional shutdown. It's a protective reaction that occurs when the brain senses emotional threat but doesn't believe that expressing pain will lead to understanding. Instead of confronting the hurt, the nervous system quietly changes strategy. It withdraws. Not dramatically, not with anger, just enough to reduce exposure. Think of it like a dimmer switch. The person doesn't disappear completely. They simply turn their emotional presence down. Their voice becomes calmer. Their reactions smaller. Their expressions more controlled. From the outside, it might look like maturity or composure. But inside, the emotional system is working hard to contain what was felt. Because the brain remembers past experiences. Moments when vulnerability was misunderstood. Times when honesty led to conflict. Situations where explaining feelings only made things worse. And the mind learns from those patterns. Over time, it forms a quiet conclusion. If expressing pain doesn't lead to safety, silence might. So the next time something hurts, the explanation never even begins. The system goes straight to shutdown. To the people around them, someone shutting down can seem distant. But internally, their mind is anything but quiet. Thoughts start replaying the moment. The words that were said. The tone behind them. The subtle shift in someone's expression. The mind searches for meaning. Did they intend that? Was I misunderstood? Should I say something about it? But another voice appears too. A quieter one. The one that says, "Let it go. It's not worth the tension. Nothing will change anyway." And slowly, the emotion gets pushed inward. Not processed. Just stored. Like a letter written but never sent. Over time, these unspoken feelings accumulate. Not always as anger. More often as something softer but heavier. Distance. Because every time someone shuts down when they're hurt, a subtle lesson is reinforced inside them. That silence is safer than vulnerability. And eventually, without even realizing it, they stop trying to explain the parts of themselves that feel the most. They simply carry them quietly. People rarely develop emotional shutdown overnight. It usually begins much earlier in life, in moments that seem small at the time, but quietly shape how someone learns to handle pain. Imagine a child trying to explain that something hurt their feelings. Maybe they say, "That wasn't nice." Or they try to express sadness. But the response they receive teaches them something important. Stop being so sensitive. You're overreacting. It's not a big deal. The child learns something subtle but powerful. Their feelings are inconvenient. And when emotional expression repeatedly meets dismissal, the brain adapts. Instead of continuing to explain, the mind starts protecting itself. The child learns to stay quiet, to process emotions alone, to keep certain feelings hidden. Years later, the adult version of that person may not even remember those early lessons consciously, but the nervous system does. And when conflict appears in adulthood, the same protective pattern activates. Silence feels familiar, safe, predictable. People who shut down when they're hurt are often misunderstood. Others may think they are distant, cold, emotionally unavailable. But the truth is often the opposite. Many of these individuals feel things very deeply. They notice subtle shifts in tone. They pick up on emotional undercurrents that others overlook. They sense tension before it's spoken out loud. That level of awareness can be overwhelming. So instead of reacting impulsively, they pause. They analyze. They step back internally. In many ways, this shutdown response is a sign of emotional control. The person is trying to prevent conflict from escalating. They are trying not to say something they might regret. They are trying to keep the situation calm. But that calmness can come at a cost, because the feelings don't disappear. They simply move inward. One of the most difficult parts of shutting down when hurt is that others rarely notice the moment it happens. To them, everything seems normal. The conversation moves on. The situation resolves itself. But internally, something remains unfinished. The person who withdrew emotionally carries the unresolved feeling with them. And over time, this creates a quiet kind of loneliness. Not because they don't have people around them, but because the deeper parts of their emotional world remain unseen. They become the person who listens, the one who stays calm, the one who doesn't cause problems, but rarely the one who says, "That hurt me." And this creates a strange paradox. The more someone protects themselves through silence, the harder it becomes for others to truly understand them. Because what others see is calmness. But what actually exists underneath is complexity. Feelings that were never spoken, questions that were never asked, and moments that quietly change the way the person feels about the relationship, even if no one else noticed. At first, shutting down when you're hurt feels like protection. It prevents arguments. It avoids uncomfortable confrontations. It keeps situations from escalating. But over time, something subtle begins to change. Every moment of silence creates a small emotional distance. Not because the person wants distance, but because unspoken feelings slowly build invisible walls. Think about it. When pain is never expressed, it cannot be understood. When feelings remain hidden, they cannot be repaired. So instead of conflict, something quieter grows. Misunderstanding. The other person continues living as if everything is fine, while the one who shut down carries a memory that was never resolved. And slowly, without either side fully realizing it, the emotional space between them widens. Not through anger, but through quiet disconnection. For someone who is used to shutting down, expressing hurt later can feel strangely uncomfortable, because vulnerability requires risk. It means saying something that might not be received well. It means revealing feelings that have been carefully contained. And when the mind has spent years learning that silence prevents pain, speaking up can feel unnatural, even dangerous. So many people who shut down tell themselves things like, "It's not important anymore. I've already moved on. There's no point bringing it up now." But the truth is often more complicated. They haven't fully moved on. They have simply adapted to carrying certain emotions alone. And that adaptation can make relationships feel peaceful on the surface, but incomplete underneath. Because genuine connection requires something that shutdown prevents: honest emotional visibility. The interesting thing about emotional shutdown is that it rarely disappears through force. Telling someone to just speak up doesn't work. Because shutdown isn't stubbornness. It's protection. And protection only softens when the nervous system begins to feel safe again. Safe enough to believe that honesty won't lead to rejection. Safe enough to believe that vulnerability won't be dismissed. When people who usually shut down encounter relationships where their feelings are listened to rather than corrected, something begins to shift. Slowly, the silence becomes less necessary. The instinct to retreat weakens, and little by little, the person starts experimenting with a different response. Not immediate confrontation, just small moments of honesty. Simple sentences like, "That actually hurt me. I felt misunderstood there." These small openings can feel enormous to someone who spent years protecting themselves through silence. But they are also the beginning of something powerful. Because when emotional safety grows, shutdown no longer needs to be the default. If you are someone who shuts down when you're hurt, it doesn't mean you are cold. It doesn't mean you are emotionally distant. More often, it means you have learned to protect your heart carefully. Perhaps you have felt things deeply in environments where depth was not understood. Perhaps you discovered that silence prevented further pain. But protection and isolation are not the same thing. And the mind is capable of learning new forms of safety. The truth is that many of the most thoughtful, emotionally aware people in the world share this pattern. They pause instead of reacting. They reflect instead of exploding. They protect instead of exposing. But healing often begins when those quiet protectors slowly allow themselves to be seen again. Not by everyone, just by the right people. Because the goal was never to remove the instinct to protect your heart. The goal is simply to discover that sometimes it is safe enough to open it again.